Property prices in multiple areas around the country continue to rise significantly every month. Now people are starting to ask, have I missed out? Should I buy now or should I wait and see? When will property prices stop rising and become more affordable? Today, I'm going to answer all those questions. Plus, if you stay until the end, I'll also talk about how the rising unemployment and the weak economy, what it will mean for property prices going forwards. It's probably not what you're thinking. Let's go. Hello, it's Nero here, and let's begin by busting a major myth. Have you ever heard someone tell you that property prices double every 7 years? Well, let's put that myth to bed. Looking at this chart from Matuzik, you can see that property prices have risen 67.5% over not the last 7 years, but the last 10 years. Yes, that's still significant growth, but it's nowhere near doubling. So property prices don't double on average everywhere. So then where does this myth come from and what does it have to do with you? Well, where it comes from is that people used to think that the property market went in 7-year cycles. So you had what was known as peak growth, or the most amount of growth in a particular 7-year cycle. But when we look at the data, we see that property prices in Australia don't actually follow a 7-year cycle. Here we have a chart looking at the annual change in median detached house sales price in Australia over the last 43 years. Now, we're not looking at when the property market reached a peak in terms of the price or when it actually reached a bottom. What we're looking at here is the rate of growth, how quickly property prices are rising or falling. And what you can see here is that if we look at more recent times, in September of 2017, that was when the property market was growing the fastest at that time. After that, the rate of growth started to slow down. It did go somewhat negative there in June of 2019. Then property prices started to grow more quickly, reaching a peak in March of 2022. That was roughly 2 years ago. That was just before interest rates then started to rise. Now, what's really interesting about this chart is that after the market reached its fastest rate of growth, yes, there's a slowdown in terms of the price growth after that, but the time period when property price growth turns negative is actually very, very short. And we're seeing that again in this current cycle. For example, after March 2022, interest rates then started to rise. We saw property prices on average across Australia fall by 7.5% in the next 9 months. But then since then, property prices have continued to rise. They've now risen for 15 months in a row. So what does this mean in terms of trying to work out when will this price boom end across Australia? And again, I'm talking about the median house price in Australia here. Different markets are doing different things. But if you just look at the basic trend, what it would show you is that the price boom in Australia should be ending somewhere around 2026, 2027, just based on that trend of the chart that I showed you. But here's why I think we could be in for an extended period of price growth in Australia. Even though the economy is weak, even though unemployment is rising, and I'll come back to those factors in just a moment. Number one, let's have a look at the building approvals. We're building fewer homes now than we have been in over a decade. Building approval numbers right now are as low as they were back in 2012. We don't have enough new supply coming onto the market. Then when we look at the existing supply, which refers to the number of established properties on the market or the number of listings, what you can see again from the data is that listings right now in 2024 are much, much lower than they were between 2012 to 2020. We just don't have enough properties for sale in Australia. Many real estate agents right now are really worried because they don't have enough listings. In fact, one major real estate agency I spoke to recently in a capital city said that right now, for the first time, they have 0 listings, no properties for sale. So that's a huge concern. We don't have enough supply. And then if you look at this data, which tracks how quickly our population is growing as a percentage, you can see that migration right now is the fastest as a percentage since back in the 1920s. So with so many people wanting property both to buy and to rent and not enough properties available, it's no wonder then that we are looking at a shortfall of properties across Australia of about 200,000 by the end of this financial year. Now again, that shortfall is not equal across different areas. You need to look at which areas have the biggest shortfalls, as I've spoken about before. But the fact is, we just don't have enough properties. There's a huge shortfall. It's no wonder that many buyers have decided to not wait for interest rate cuts. They're jumping in right now. For example, loans to first home buyers are increasing. Loans to investors are increasing. They just may not be buying in Sydney and Melbourne though, as they might have at some point in the past. So with all this excess demand for property right now, I fully expect that property prices will keep rising at different rates in different areas, but they'll keep rising for much longer than beyond 2026 and 2027. Many experts think that property prices will keep rising until 2030, which means that no matter how expensive property prices are right now, this is the cheapest they will be ever in many areas around Australia. But then you have to be wondering, how can that be when interest rates are at the highest they've ever been at, the economy is slowing, retail spending is at record lows, and unemployment is increasing? Because if unemployment is increasing, people can't afford loans, they can't go and buy properties. Wouldn't that then crash the market? Well, the sad reality is that it actually won't. Let me give you a quick example. Let's just say, for example, there are 100 people looking for properties to buy in a particular area, and there are only 60 properties available. So you can clearly see that you've got more demand, 100 people, versus supply, 60 properties. Now, let's imagine that 20 of those people lose their jobs. So that means that instead of having 100 people now looking for properties, you only have 80 people because those 20 who lost their jobs can't get a loan to buy property anymore. So now you've got 80 people looking for 60 properties. There's still more demand than supply, and that means that property prices will continue to grow. It's a sad reality, but it does reflect the size of the housing crisis we have in Australia. And that's why I believe that 2024 is a great time to buy an investment property if you can afford to, because the data shows that there is a fundamental undersupply of property that will keep forcing property prices higher. And remember, interest rates are at the highest they've been at for over a decade. And based on what we just heard from the Reserve Bank of Australia, it certainly seems like the next movement for interest rates will be down. It just may take a bit longer than many people expected to. But when interest rates do fall, you have many people whose borrowing capacities will increase, and they will look to buy property and enter the market, further increasing demand. Plus, we have the tax cuts as well coming into force from July, which will also increase people's borrowing capacities. So you have so much demand coming and increasing, so many factors pointing towards more demand while we struggle with supply. That really is going to mean that property prices are in for an extended run, an extended period of price growth. I think will go well beyond the 2026, 2027 mark that the data has showed, because we have such a housing crisis. But the growth in property prices won't be equal everywhere. You need to do your due diligence. Some areas will still struggle. So if you want help to find the best areas to invest in, check out the link below to get totally for free the audio version and digital version of my book. Otherwise, I'll see you next time.